And we're excited. We're continuing our church online. And for those of you that are still at home, have made a decision to be at home, whether it's underlying conditions, age, maybe you still got little kids and you're not comfortable being at church, absolutely understand. But both San Angelo and Arlington physically are meeting. We're in one service in San Angelo at 10 a.m. We're in one service in Arlington at 11 a.m. But we're back with children's ministry, nursery, and all those things are functioning and going. And so we invite you to that. But for those of you that are choosing to watch online, we're excited. We're glad that you're here. And my desire is to keep this going. And we just feel like that who knows where this is going to go. We may have members joining online from around the world. And so we've opened ourselves up for whatever that looks like. Today I want to continue a message that I really felt very passionate about last week. And if you didn't watch last week's message, I'd encourage you to go to the website and tune into that. Watch that message. It's pleasing God. And we talked about pleasing God through chaos, and we went to the book of Micah, Micah 6, and really looked at some things that the Lord clearly lays out, 3 keys that we can do. But also, I'm always looking for, there's so many passages that I could think of as far as just from pleasing God. I think about so many heroes of our faith and different individuals throughout our Bibles that please God. And so we want to look at an individual today, Joseph, there in Genesis. And Joseph, what a great passage of or story that he has, life story, life journey, and pleasing God with purpose. Pleasing God with purpose. Now, sometimes we don't always understand the full purpose of that. And so we know in Genesis chapter 37, verse 5, it talks about Joseph having this dream that he had. He shares it with his brothers, and because of the way the dream is laid out and communicated, they didn't receive it real well. Matter of fact, it says that they actually hated him for it. And so there was a lot of jealousy and a lot of challenge that was there. But I love what happens as you go through the story. And by the time you end up over in Genesis 45 and verse 7, it says, "And God sent me." So in other words, he's now toward the end of the story with his brothers, and he makes this statement. He said, "And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, to save your lives by great deliverance." So now it was not you who sent me here, but God, and He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Joseph connected finally, understanding God's divine purpose for his life. Now, it wasn't an easy journey. I almost titled this message, Pleasing God Through Injustice, because when you look at Joseph's life, man, did this guy suffer, under some genuine persecution and some discrimination and false accusations, just all these things. So let's set it up. Let's look at when you think about Joseph's life. So here he is, a young man, 17 years old, and his father had sent him out to talk to his brothers, take some things to them, and they despised him. They saw him coming. They're like, okay, let's take care of this dreamer. And they throw him in a pit. They're thinking about killing him. And one of the older brothers there, the oldest, Reuben, I believe it was, that talked him out of it. And they end up selling him to this caravan that was coming by, and they took him to Egypt, and there he was sold into slavery. And then from there, so he's serving in Potiphar's house, and then from Potiphar's house, he has the whole encounter with Potiphar's wife trying to pursue him, to sleep with him. And in that, he is just like, man, I can't do this. How would I sin against my God? This isn't right. And so he ends up actually running out of the house, and she pulls his cloak off of him, his outer garment, and so he runs off. And so she makes up this story that basically he tried to rape her or sleep with her. And so Potiphar has him committed to prison and to where the prisoners are at, where a lot of the officials would go that Pharaoh has placed there. So it's called, actually referred to by Joseph as a dungeon. So it's not a pleasant place. And so he's there, and he's again just being Joseph through that process, and ends up that he runs into these two guys that are because Joseph is promoted to the place of actually running the prison from within as a prisoner. But he runs into these two guys, the cupbearer and the baker, that are evidently had a run-in with the Pharaoh, and were sentenced to prison. And so it says after they were there for a time, Joseph comes by. He sees them in their despair, where they're saddened, and he notices the difference in their disposition. Talks to them. They both had dreams. Joseph interprets the dreams. The cupbearer is restored. The baker is actually killed, and he tells that cupbearer, "Don't forget about me. Please remember me, that I have been falsely accused, and I've been serving. I've been in this prison, and I don't belong here." And the cupbearer gets reinstated to his rightful position there, serving the Pharaoh, and he forgets about Joseph, it says, until the right time when Pharaoh has this dream. And none of Pharaoh's soothsayers or any of his people that he's got, they can't interpret the dream. And so the cupbearer then is in that position, in that place, to be able to connect the Pharaoh with Joseph. And Joseph comes and lets God work through him to interpret Pharaoh's dreams. And then we see where Pharaoh now has brought him out of prison and makes him second in command, right directly. He's actually first in command under himself as Pharaoh. But he made him in charge of everything about Egypt, especially with all the farming and all the things that needed to be done, and overseen. Well, in this process, this was no small thing that happened. Think about this. He was 17 years old whenever he goes in, and for 13 years he's serving in Pharaoh's house and then in prison. This was no small stint. So it was a lengthy time. But what was it about Joseph that brought him to this place of pleasing God with his purpose? And I believe there are some things that really stand out. And in this, the first thing is, I honestly, truly believe that Joseph he never let go of his dream. When you look at Joseph at every level, his demeanor, his disposition, he's hopeful. He never lost hope. He continued to dream. I think that's why even the brothers, when they saw him coming, they said, "Here comes that dreamer." And what a label, what a testimony. Do those around us look at us at times and go, "Oh my goodness, there they go again. There's that dreamer. There's that person filled with hope, filled with life, that just they live different. They act different." And I want you to consider, what would it take for you? Because right now, some of you may have felt like that boy, you have lost hope. Maybe your dreams you feel like has just really been slammed. And so you're struggling. You're maybe in a place of despair. But Joseph gave us a great example of staying hopeful, not losing hope, no matter what he was faced with over those years, many years. Obviously, he stayed hopeful. He stayed positive. You don't see him complaining. You don't see him down in the mully grubs. You don't see him, getting all negative. And here he was, a very person that I believe it was about God's promise for his life. What has God promised you? See, what has God put on the inside of you that allows for you to be hopeful, that maybe the world and maybe circumstances and maybe difficulties and things have tried to suffocate it, have tried to extinguish it. But is there something that God has promised that's alive on the inside? Because Paul wrote that the promises of God are yes and amen. The promises of God carry us through difficult times. And you can stay a person filled with hope when you understand his promises. Now, it may take us on a journey that we didn't anticipate, we didn't plan for, we didn't think that this is how this would come to pass. But for Joseph, even through all that trials and tribulation, persecution, false accusation, disloyalty, all the different things you could go through in that, he held on to the promise. But there was something else. I want to ask you this. What does God say about you? See, what's he say about me? Because God wants to say some things about us that may be very different from our circumstances, may be different from what the world says about us. Maybe some people that have said some things that may be very hurtful, very harmful to you. And maybe you've been labeled, alcoholic, drug addict, divorcee, failure, bankrupter. What is it that maybe you feel somehow has now labeled you, that has created this place of failure? But what does God say? See, here's an interesting thing. When Joseph shows up in Egypt, he's being sold into slavery. And you've got to get the picture of this, because what they would do, they're trying to allow those who would be purchasing that slave to see the specimen of the specimen of the person, the man that you're buying. And so typically they would strip them down to pretty much full exposure and stand them there publicly with people bidding to purchase them. That's the scene for Joseph being sold into Potiphar's house. And the interesting thing is that while that is happening, the Bible states, and God looked upon Joseph at that moment. God looked upon Joseph and said, here is a successful man. Isn't that incredible? That here Joseph is being sold into slavery. And in that moment, God chooses to say, here is a successful man. It would have looked like that, and because the word successful there actually means a prosperous man. That he's prosperous. Excuse me? He's being sold into slavery. The world would look at that scene and say, they're impoverished, they're being mistreated, they're being abused, they own nothing. They have nothing. They own nothing. And yet God says, you know what? I look at you beyond the circumstance. I look at you beyond the situation. I look at you through my eye, and I declare you're prosperous, that you are successful, that you are more than what it appears in this moment. what is God saying about you? Do you believe the Bible when it says that we have been made more than conquerors through Christ who loves us? Do you believe the Bible that truly declares that if you have made a decision to become a Christ follower, that now you're a child of the living God, that you have been forgiven of your sins, that He calls you forgiven, that He calls you redeemed, that He calls you not with whatever failures and whatever struggles and whatever even things that are still going on in your life. The reality is, in this human flesh and who we are in the natural, that there may still be some struggles. There may still be things that we're trying to work through and get past. But listen, just like He made those declarations of His word for Joseph, I believe He's making that over your life. And that you are all that God says you are. You can be everything that God says you can be. So not only you need to ask, what has God promised me, but what does God say about me? But you know what? You're a child of the Most High God if you have made Jesus Christ Lord of your life. And you can be confident in all the other things that God has said about you, that you are loved. You are loved by God Himself, but you are loved by others who understand the love of God. God's love is powerful. All that God says about you, you need to embrace. And then I think we need to recognize, what is God going to do through us? What is God going to do through us? And I love the way this actually started is when you think about the difference that he made in Potiphar's house. He was promoted to oversee all of Potiphar's house. False accusation comes. He does not give in to the temptations that are there, but he then is charged with false accusation. He ends up being thrown into prison. And there again, he just, again, by the character of who he is and that influence, he's promoted. He's promoted. He's now given charge of the whole prison. Everybody's under him. He's able to manage and run and do all that. But it's a prison. It's can you imagine, coming from, the lineage of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob, who was Israel, had a name change, his father, and having the prestige, having the legacy that he had, having been in a very superior place, knowing that he had this dream on the inside of him that God had given him. And God even saying that he was a successful man, prosperous man, all of those things. And yet here he is having to do menial things, having to be faithful, to do things that he would have maybe never had to really do, and yet here he is, just simply taking the high road in a low place, taking and being faithful, and obviously just the character of who he was continuing to shine through. But here's something that stood out to me as I was reading and studying this, is when the two officials, the cupbearer and the baker, were placed in prison, it said after a period of time. So that tells me they were there for a stint. So Joseph got to look at their lives, got to see them. And it says when Joseph came by that morning, he noticed their countenance. He noticed that they were showing signs of maybe depression, of their demeanor. They were downcast. And it says that Joseph took the time to inquire about him. This man cared. His influence is just amazing to me of just this storyline and watching how Joseph lived his faith. Obviously, there were things that were imparted to him, that he was properly trained. That's why it's so vital that we train up our children in the way they should go, that we take the time and that we live our lives in such a way that truly, imparts this to those next generations, because they'll see past it. If you're just showing up on Sunday and you're punching a clock, or you're going through some religious motion and you're not taking that to where it's a true relationship with God in a personal way and from a day-to-day basis where it's a lifestyle, then I'm telling you, kids see through that. They're going to go hypocrisy, and they'll despise that. But if it's vital, if it's real, and this is culture of who we are, and you begin to really say with your life, not just with your words, but with your life, that people matter to me, and I'm going to check on people. I'm going to care for people. I want to find the hurting, the downcast, the outcast. I want to minister the influence of God through me to touch their lives. Joseph was doing that, even with that cupbearer and the baker, as he took the time for them to do that. But beyond that, boy, did God have so much higher of a calling and purpose. And sometimes we don't always know what that's going to look like. Sometimes we want those end results without going through the process. Sometimes going through the process is what helps lead us to this other place. I think back and I look back at my own life and how I have been willing to serve in areas and places, even whenever I became a Christian. At that time, I was running a company, but becoming a Christian put me at odds with some of those in authority and a situation there. I won't go into detail. Don't want to expose or hurt anybody, but it was a very difficult time and season in my life, and I lost my job. And the only thing that I found initially, and I didn't go out hunting, I was spending a lot of time in prayer, and I had taken some time off in a sense, and was truly pressing into the things of God in that season where I was at. And I had an opportunity to do that. But I had an old friend, buddy, that came by, and he was working for a landscape company. He said, hey, we don't have, it's not much, but 20 hours a week, And so I was like, okay, here's an opportunity. I'm not going to pass it up. It was very menial. I had been running a company with a lot of employees, a lot of workload, making things happen, lining out work, bidding work, getting work, making work happen. And all of a sudden, here I am working part-time, picking up trash, mowing grass, doing things planting little daisies, doing things that I would have never thought that I would have done for a very small wage, to be honest. And yet I did that for that season. And that part-time job helped me financially enough to still take care of some things, but it afforded me that other time that I needed to truly reset my life to a place in the Word and in the Spirit and the things of God that I believe helped me to arrive even at the place that I'm at today. When I think about the vision, the dream that I had in my heart, the prophetic words that I've had over my life, and that first opportunity came to pastor a little church in Lockhart, Texas, right down below Austin, a little small community, a little small church. and to move my family with my babies, my little kids, and to take a position that I went from making what I would typically make in a week to making that in a month, and to downsize, to take that very small opportunity and to watch what God has done through the years. See, some of us, we never get started because we're somehow waiting around for our ship to come in, for this big thing that we feel like that God's put in our heart and in our life. And yet we arrive at so many of those big things by being faithful in the little things, understanding the relationships. See, for Joseph to connect with that cupbearer the way he did in that relationship, even though initially, the cupbearer forgot about him, didn't remember him, didn't do right in that. But you know what? Maybe there was a timing of God even in that, so that at the right time, he was able to share with Pharaoh. And Pharaoh was able to say, hey, I need this guy. To this passage that was the text that we started here, when it says that he had not only been able to save his own posterity for his family, for his lineage, for his mother and father and brothers and all their family, and to be able to bring them up, put them in Goshen, and they became this nation. But he had become ruler of all of Egypt. But I love this passage of Scripture when it says, but God, he has made me a father to Pharaoh. Isn't that amazing? That here's, this incredible leader of this huge nation during that time. And here was Joseph that had become that father figure, that advisor, listen, for us to be able to arrive at that place, there's some stuff that we'll go through. I can promise you that. Life's journey. If you are going to aspire into big things and big places, you better understand that the devil's going to put a target on you. There's a price to pay. There's a process to go through. There are some things that you will have to learn and grow and mature for things to come together in its fullness. But to think that we can please God like Joseph did through all of those things and come out on the other side and experience the fullness of all that God has for us. I pray that some of you right now today are saying, you know what, Pastor, this is speaking to me in my life right now. Because it's not over. If you are a true Christ follower, it's not over. And I want to encourage you right now to receive this message of hope, of encouragement, but turn your heart and begin to pray to God. If you're not a Christ follower, why not right now simply say, Jesus, be the Lord and Master of my life. Take control of my life. Help me to live for you. Forgive me of my sins. Come into my heart. See, if you're willing to do that right now, we want to encourage you to contact us. On the online platform, you can reach out and somebody will be there to pray with you and talk to you about the decision that you're making. If you are watching this in one of the other areas that this may be on Facebook or one of the other, YouTube or something, you need to email us or private message us. Let us know if you're making a decision to follow Jesus for the first time or rededicating your life. We want to get you some information. And we're building some things for online. So if you are choosing to watch online, be a part of our church online, we've got next steps coming up. We've got some things that are in the works. But again, we thank you. We appreciate you so much. And you know what? Again, let this speak to you. Please God in your sphere of influence, in God's purpose for your life. Till next week, God bless you.
You reached from the sky, leaving heaven's throne. I was meant to die, you wouldn't let me go. The riches of your grace I cannot afford. My guilt has been erased, now I'm forever yours. And oh, what a price you paid, trading the highest place. Lay down your crown for me. How great a King! From death life has begun, a garden from the grave. You're bursting through the night, yours is the victory. Oh, from death life has begun, a garden from the grave. You're bursting through the night, yours is the victory. And oh, what a price you paid, trading the highest place. Lay down your crown for me. How great a King! And oh, what a life you gave. You gave up everything that you would die for me. How great a King! Oh, how great a King! For all you are and all you've done, we lift you up, lift you up. For all you are and all you've done, we lift you up. For all you are and all you've done, we lift you up, lift you up. For all you are and all you've done, we lift you up, we lift you up. For all you are and all you've done, we lift you up, lift you up. For all you are and all you've done, we lift you up. And oh, what a price you paid, trading the highest place. Lay down your crown for me. How great a King! And oh, what a life you gave. You gave up everything that you would die for me. How great a King! Oh, how great a King! Yeah. Oh, how great a King! Yeah. And oh, what a price you paid, trading the highest place. Lay down your crown for me. How great a King! And oh, what a life you gave. You gave up everything that you would die for me. worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. And worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside